our first presenter for the night is Jacob Brown. Jacob Brown is an artist blacksmith, originally from California. At age 15, he started working as a welder and metal fabricator in Oakland, California. Later, he attended the Oxbow School in Napa, California, where he concentrated on sculpture. He then moved on to study at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where he obtained a BFA. Following that, Jake completed his blacksmithing apprenticeship at the National Ornamental Music Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. He's traveled across the country and internationally to study and work with different smiths. He then became a studio head for blacksmithing, fine metals, and woodworking at Peters Valley. Jake now lives in Memphis, Tennessee, where he is the facilities manager for the Metals Museum. Welcome, Jake.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Alrighty, hi. So Brienne kind of covered my my early life as a blacksmith. Right now I am, all right, how's that? Can you see the screen?
Yeah,
Brienne?
we can see it. We can see it, Jake.
All right, cool. So I started blacksmithing about 20 years ago. You know, I can thank that largely to really supportive parents and local organizations out in California that were really helpful in getting started doing that kind of thing. So, but this is just a sort of broad scope of my work over the years. So, do a lot of hardware, kitchen tools, things like that. These are a wrench spatula that I made a few years ago. Another one here. Let's see. Espresso tamp and spoon. This is the reins for a pizza cutter that I ended up making for a birthday present for my lovely girlfriend, Jacqueline Scott. Trowel. Early American style hunting knife. Lately, I've been doing a lot of engraved produce on kitchen knives. This is sort of like a all-around kind of kitchen chopper or knife. There's a steak on that one. The last one had eggplant on it. Let's see, another steak, carrots. The produce, like vegetables, translate really well to engraving on the knives. I found I really like them a lot. They're beautiful. Asparagus here. When I grew up, my next door neighbors were hot glass blowers, so a lot of that kind of translates into my the more gallery work that I do. And so I started making vases out of steel pipe a few years ago, and it's a very similar process. A lot of the heat's very similar, and the way that you hold on to it and kind of manipulate it, it's pretty similar. You just can't get quite as close to it as you can with glass, I found. Let's see, but here's some of the finished pieces here. So they're all compressed, tapered down pipe, done by hand and on the power hammer. Different patinas and finishes. Here's some forged brackets that I made a few years ago for cookbooks that went on top for a family and friend. This is wrought iron and steel. First one was a gin bottle. This is a baseball bat, a hammer, and a cleaver. This is a piece called Primitive Love. It's just two earthworms coming up through a piece of plate. I really like this. It's probably one of my favorite things I've ever made. I just found this piece of steel looked like mud, and so I made some worms for it and some grass. Okay, a few years ago, I was contacted by a scissor making company in California, and they wanted me to make a chair out of some donated shears that they had. That was sort of in the Game of Thrones style theme, like the throne of swords. This is the throne of scissors. So I started building it in just a regular plastic lawn chair, and this is sort of how it took shape. It's a lot of forging and shaping and welding together. I basically would make a bunch of generic shapes and chuck them into a pile, and then move on. I didn't really have a lot of time to think about what I was doing with the parts so much as assembling them later on. Is sort of when that all kind of came together. This is a video of it put together. All the blue tape is still where there was like pokey parts. So I had like several family and friends sit in it and put tape on where all the sharp spots were. And then eventually we'd just sort of hammer them and torch them down so it was nice and soft. That's me sitting in the chair. It's a close-up of the emblem for the company. It's Hattori Hanzo shears out in California if you ever want to look at very fancy hair cutting shears. Thank you. That's it. Are there any questions? No?
Thank you, Jake.
Welcome.
Love your work. That was great. Next, we're going to be joined by Dr. William Carty. William Carty is the John F. McMahon Professor and Chair of Ceramic Engineering at Alfred University. He received his BS and MS in Ceramic Engineering from the University of Missouri-Rolla and his PhD in Materials Science from the University of Washington. He and his research group have, with the help of many graduate and undergraduate students, conducted research in all aspects of traditional ceramics, clay, bodies, and glazes, primarily in advanced microstructure evolution, and materials behaviors. Bill has taken a special interest in the work and challenges facing artists who use ceramics as a primary medium. He has authored or co-authored over 80 papers and is a frequent contributor to NCECA. Welcome, Bill. You're on mute. Bill, are you able to turn your sound? There we go.
Good.
Yep, great.
Great. So, thank you. That was.
Bill, we just see your desktop.
Let's do this. That would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Perfect.
So, thank you for inviting me. I'm sort of an outlier here because I'm a scientist and an engineer rather than an artist, and I've taught at Peters Valley probably for about 10 or 12 years, about every other year. Bruce and I have become very good friends, and it's always been fun to come there. This past May, I retired from Alfred University, so I'm no longer teaching, but I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm still teaching ceramic science for the artist. So in the past, I've talked about Korean celadons, I've talked about glaze defects, and some other things, and I was asked to do introduction to research for a group in Montreal that were putting together a ceramic research effort. And I talked to Bruce about this, and he thought this would be a good idea. So basically, I was going to give you an insight into how engineers and scientists look at research. So when we deal with students, this is the experimental process that we teach them. You're supposed to create a hypothesis. It's a statement, not a question. It's not usually like, what would happen if I change the temperature? Instead, it would be, I would predict that if I change the temperature in this fashion, results would change in this way. And then ideally, you would look in the background and see what's been done already. And then you construct an experimental plan. And that's the part that's the most interest, I think, to you. You would compile your experimental results and interpret the data, draw conclusions, and make a conclusion. Does your data support your hypothesis? And everyone wants their data to support their hypothesis. But in fact, that's not important, because if you make a hypothesis that turns out to be false, that's also very instructive. Of course, you could go back and change your hypothesis to match your data. We don't see that at all in our country at the moment. So I think it would be an interesting approach. And then you communicate your results and your conclusions, usually in the form of some sort of publication. But the idea of constructing an experimental plan is essentially this. You have two things. You have a variable, which is what you change, and you have a response, which is what happens. So the best way to approach the problem is that you might make a list of the variables. And this may not be a trivial exercise. You may say, oh, well, I want to change X and Y, and then find out that you have several other variables that you didn't think about. We run into this frequently when doing research in engineering. You start off with what seems like a simple problem, and the next thing you know, you're dealing with all sorts of variables that you didn't anticipate. A big one for a lot of the work that we work with is humidity, for example, which today in Western New York, it's very humid. If you have too many variables to manage, you might be able to screen your variables to see what's important, and then you can reduce the number of variables. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a few minutes. And then your responses is what happens. You should try to list your possible responses because that helps to guide you in how you interpret your data. So you might decide, for example, if you're looking at glazes, maybe the texture is a response you would like, or color. And if you list those responses in advance, it helps you think about your problem differently and more comprehensively. So in an experimental plan, we try to get engineering students and artists also to think about it in terms of goals. List your variables and your responses, create a matrix of experiments, and then you might ask yourself, is this manageable? Do you need to do 10 experiments, or do you have to do 100? We do a lot of work with industry, and one of the interesting aspects of that is that they may work with very, very large lots of material. Rail cars, for example, which are 45 tons, we can't usually deal with that sort of volumes. Outline your experiments, determine what your material needs are, execute a matrix and complete it. We have a tendency when we're doing experimental work to find that perfect result and then stop and go, we've solved the problem, we're done. But actually, it's better if you complete the matrix because you'll see where the limits are of what you're looking at. Take notes. I recommend that you get a notebook without pages that you can tear out because then everything stays in the notebook and you can come back and find it. The next part is, can you anticipate the responses? You might consider bracketing the behavior, meaning that you might create samples that you know won't work. And that sounds sort of odd, but if you can design an experiment where you can determine the limits of what you're able to observe, you actually learn a lot more. And then you might do a set of preliminary experiments. So you might do what is called nested experiments. The first experiment, you look at a very broad range of things. You find out the area that's interesting to evaluate, and then you go into that area and you do your more detailed experiments. The next one sounds funny. Conduct your experiments in a random order. Humidity is a good example. I had a friend of mine, when I came to Alfred, did all of his experiments, he did them in a random order, and when he looked at all his data, when he did it in order based on the random order, he found out that he had what's called a run order effect. The results of his work indicated that they changed with time. And it was because humidity interacted with his sample and changed his results. So he had to redo his experiments. And then plot your data. Plotting is remarkably beneficial for evaluating data. And you might be able to put your results on an existing diagram, something you found from the literature, or in a diagram that you may have seen in a class. And that helps you interpret your data differently. So I have an example that I was going to throw out just as a sort of a high elevation view. 1912, this guy named Stull, he looked at glazes. And the reason he looked at glazes was because at that time, bathrooms were coming into the household. And with the increase in houses being built that had bathrooms and putting wall tile on the walls, the wall tile would craze from the humidity in the bathroom, and he wanted to understand crazing. So each of the open circles that you see on this plot are actual samples that he tested, and he created this map of glaze behavior. The horizontal axis here is the amount of silica in the glaze, and the vertical axis is the amount of alumina. And all of these compositions have the same level of flux. And so this is called a Sager formula or unity molecular formula. We evaluate this matrix by setting up 4 points and then A, B, C, and D. And with 4 points, you can blend. We call it a matrix blend or an endpoint or line blend. I can blend A and C, for example, and I can really easily do 5 points, the middle, and then the middle with the endpoint to give me a quarter. It turns out it's really easy to do 25 points in a square matrix or a rectangle, or 81 points because you do the next half. But it turns out that 16 is really tough. And you can blend these by volume if your water level is the same in your glazes, and that makes it easier. So you might first say that, well, my variables then are going to be chemistry and then firing temperature. And my response that I'm going to look for would be texture. Is it going to be a gloss or a matte? or maybe melting behavior, does it melt or does it run? And then does it have crazing? So in this plot, these cross-hatched regions that are to the left and below that that solid dark line, those are glazes that crazed, and that was Stoll's specific interest. Also in here in the up where B is, on the upper side, we see matte glazes. A and D are supposed to be in gloss glazes. And then C is actually, it says devitrified, but it's actually under fire. So there's a lot of information. And when we do glaze calc, we go and we create glazes on this plot, and we find out that the plot actually works. But if you start thinking about the variables, there's a bunch of variables that we ignored. And chemistry, obviously, and firing temperature, those are bolded in the list. And then the raw materials that you select might make a difference. Your water content in your batch will make a difference. The quality of your mixing makes a difference. How thick is the glaze applied? On a bisque tile or a green tile, so are you twice fire or single fire? And with these variables, we can go one step further and we can list them. Oops, wrong direction. We can say that some of these variables will be fixed. So I'm going to fix my raw materials. I'm only going to use certain raw materials, and I'm not going to say change one feldspar for another. I might decide I'm only going to do 2 fire glazes. So I bisque my glaze, my body first, and then I apply the glaze, which, by the way, in this chart to the right, Stoll's all of his tiles were bisque tiles. And then I will keep my firing temperature constant. So those are fixed. Those are variables I don't have to incorporate into my matrix. If I wish to, though, I could do so. So I could say fire this whole matrix at a different temperature and then evaluate how temperature affects this. We call that nested experiments. And then ideally fixed, you would argue that your batch water content should be the same. And you would argue that your quality of the mixing that you do is the same for every one of these tests. But recognize that your goal here is to understand the chemistry. And if you mixed poorly in one case and not in another, you're no longer talking about the same chemistry with everyone. So your responses stay the same. Texture is a gloss or matte, melting behavior, crazing, other glaze defects, etc. Okay, so this wraps it up for me. I'm within my time limit, which I'm impressed by myself with that. So you're welcome to ask me questions. You can email me, and I promise I will answer at some point. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thanks, Bill. It was really nice to have a different kind of presentation.
Thank you.
So technical, and so much goes into it. I just love it. Next, we'll be joined by Shinji Otani. For you, those of you that tuned in last week, Shinji was here presenting a collection of his portraits, and he'll be showing us a whole different body of work this week. Shinji Otani was a ceramist in Japan before becoming a photographer. In 2007, he finished his study in photography at the Gerrit Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam. He won the Unseen Dummy Award 2012 of Unseen Photo Fair Amsterdam, and selected awards include Epson Art Photo Awards in Germany and Raymond Weil Photo Award in Switzerland. Shinji's work has been exhibited in the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, UK, and Japan, including FOAM in Amsterdam, Netherlands Photo Museum in Rotterdam, Abasho Ten Mangu Museum in Fukuoka. I don't know.
Well done.
He provides images to GQ Japan, Wire Japan, City of Amsterdam, Maison Hermes, and the Dutch Royal House. He's joining us from Amsterdam. For those of you that have taken ceramics at Peters Valley, Shiro Otani is his father. He's a very esteemed wood-fired ceramist, and we're so glad that you could join us again. It's 1 in the morning there, so we are so happy that you are here to present us with even more of your beautiful work this week. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, so the first things first, I would like to show a little bit of paperwork I made. And can you see? So this is one A4, and you fold 1 to 3 times. Then you got a small book. I'm talking about the book today. When you open the corner, so here's page 1, page 2, 3, etc. but actually the order, it's not, it's a bit difficult because here's number 1, and here's number 2, and then number 3, and then, you know, it's kind of random, but it looks like. So that's kind of the trick I used for the first book. Can you see? It's a series about the country of the rising sun, which I published in 2013. And it's about the Swedish landscape I made during the graduation work when I studied at Amsterdam. So it's about Swedish landscapes like this. Like that. And then after I had the exhibition, and people said, why don't you publish a book out of this series? And then I just talked to my designer friend, and we had a discussion about how we create the book out of this exhibition space. So it's a challenge of changing the space to the book shape. If you go to the exhibition, you can see the kind of overview like this. You're getting closer and you reach to the single images. And then this is the book I published. And yeah, on the beginning, you can start to flipping a page, then you start to recognize it's something a bit strange. Orientation, you have to change all the time by yourself. And actually, this is a book not about photography, it's about picture of the walls. I put those pictures. So I photograph entire wall in one image, and then together with those pictures, and then fold it like what I did a few minutes ago, and then publish the book. So these are dummies. I precisely making the dummies. How does it look like after the folding? Then I made the order of each position of the photographs. Then after I made a format of all the pagings, and then you see this one turn into be this one. And this each images are exactly the wall I created on my house. So I just put the picture on the wall like this, and I photograph as a one shot, and I fold it 4 times to create this book. But the point is, I intendedly made those walls after I made this dummy. So if this picture folded 2 times becomes symmetric like this, and these 2 images actually made out of this one and this one, but other 2 parts are also connected to each other on the different pages. So there were like 66 images in total, which never get any loss or cropped. So everything in there, it's just a matter of the folding. And then that creates sort of the special way of reading this book. Instead of following the page from page 1 to the page end, you really kind of get into the space of the book itself. So that was a challenge, convert the exhibition space to the book shape. So this is only the half image, but the other half, if you're following the paper, it's still there. So it's nothing cropped. And you see this blank page, it's actually not the blank, it's an image of the wall. So everything's photography, everything's captured. So it looks like a white blank, but if you see carefully, there's a wall texture. And then the photography itself, it's also the real print on the wall. That's why you can see those pins in the corner. It's a very difficult story, so I made a sort of pop-up show in a photography museum. And then, yeah, still need some minutes to explain what I did. Second one, this one is more easy one. It's a book about the Canals of Amsterdam in 2013. It was one of the assignments from UNESCO and the city of Amsterdam to create all about Canal District, which is World Heritage after 2010. So it's kind of celebration. And basically what I did was the left part. This is a map of the city center. You see the black part. Those are the houses of the Canal District. I just photographed every single houses, which about 5,000 houses in total, and then create this map as my instruction. And each street, I kind of stitch each other to make one strip like this. And I made about 184 images, I remember, of these. It took me like more than 2 years. So that's become a part of the encyclopedia of all about this Canal District of Amsterdam, that it's all following a house number, which house number built by someone who become, you know, turned into be a different owner, and then there was a different purpose of etc. So it's, you can see all of the history. Actually, this book was not the first idea by ourselves. It was people call it third edition. The first edition was made by the guy called Caspar Phillips. That was in 1768. So that was drawing. Second edition was this in the 1990s. It looks similar, but it was analog. So black and white photography, hand printed, and then they just cut the scissor and then connect each other. And then the version I did was a bit more expanded and also precisely Photoshop. So you cannot see those stitching points. And all the collection are in Amsterdam City Archives, so you can see on the website if you like. Next one is Amsterdam Irregulars, that's in 2014, which based on my blog project together with two other guys, one photographer and one English writer. So we're three of us. We did a blog about all the hidden spots of Amsterdam every week. And this is called a spin-off version of the publication. It's always starting with one text and some photographies. Interesting point about this book about the design. You can see in the top, it says credit plus paper choice. So instead of put the caption on each images, we just decide to change the material, change the paper. I took the glossy one, another guy took the matte one. And sorry. And one more thing, on the bottom, it says map of Amsterdam, blah, 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 1657. So that's the map we used on the publication. Every time starting with a map and showing the location where it was, but since it's a very old map, it's a bit difficult to understand where exactly it is. And some of them are a bit off the grid. And you can see the difference of the paper quality. So you can see which is which. Sometimes embedding to the other side, like that. And then next one, Otta Nieuwenhuizen, 2016. It's another project with a photographer, a Dutch photographer, my friend. And we just went to 5 different locations, something very Dutch to something very Japanese. And we photographed something what we like. And we're shuffling an image in the editing process to expand our memories. And this one's a limited edition, come with a wooden box inspired by ceramics, Japanese, of course. And the result is like this, somehow connected to each other, but it's different photographers made. Very similar, but again, different photographer, different point of view. Sometimes playing with a different perspective, but somehow continuing. This one's a little bit funny picture. On the left side, that's my picture. It looks like very Dutchy, dead. Of course, I photographed the windmill, but of course, there's no mountain in Holland. So it's very Japanese pictures indeed. Last off, it's about statues in Netherlands. This topic became very controversial last few months, as you know. I made two versions. The big one, it's a limited edition, and then the small one, it's a standard edition. Starting from this kind of index. And then it's all about people create the Netherlands. So this one guy is the founder of the Royal Dutch Airlines, local folk singer. One example, interesting story. This is a king of the Netherlands, the first king of the Netherlands, created by the Royal Dutch family in 1800. Then after a few years, the neighbor like this big statues because it's not the king what they think it's nice. So they create the next one, right about 200 meters, really close to the original one. And this is just next to the parliament. So it's really about the story of the conflict and then people's competition, etc., all about the Dutch history. Okay, thank you very much. I try my best.
That was great. Thank you. Beautiful photographs. And I love you know, my favorite one was in the photos, like where you had the one with the wall and I could see the line, you know, where you said it was a long piece. It was so subtle and so effective. I love that idea.
So yeah, it was quite a big challenge how you transfer to another dimension, actually lower dimension. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Shinji.
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad that you stayed up and were able to join us again. Beautiful photographs. Thank you. So next we'll be joined by Sana Musasama. Sana Musasama received her BA from City College of New York, New York, and her MFA from Alfred University. Sana began traveling as a way to recover identity and cultural place. Clay was a geographical catalyst that brought her first to West Africa. She studied Mende pottery in Sierra Leone and ventured later to Japan, China, South America, and Cambodia. She has continued her quest, expanding her interest to tribal adornment practices in various indigenous cultures. She is challenged by the concerns surrounding the safety of women, specifically the rituals involving rites of passage, female chastity, and the purification of the female body. Sana's work is informed by history, women's studies, culture, and her travel journal. Hi, Sana.
Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Sana's going to give us a little bit of a different presentation. She is live in her studio, and she's going to show us some of her work.
Okay.
And I'll let you take it over.
Okay, thank you. I'm really, really happy to be here. And Peters Valley, actually, I have an old history. I'm sure I was there 30 years ago when they used to have cleanup day, and maybe they still do. But I would join friends and come there, and it was always a wonderful experience. So we are in St. Albans, Queens, New York, where I live, and I teach at Hunter College, and I teach at John Jay, and then I teach in my community at Jamaica Art Center. I'm going to take you through a little journey with my work here, but you know, I think about what is work, what is an artist's work, and I'd have to say that as a woman, also my travels. I'm a storyteller, and a lot of the ideas from my work come from experiences of traveling around the world. And travel was the way that I wanted to educate myself before I sat in MFA programs and grad programs and residencies. I wanted to travel and see the world. I wanted to test my systems up against other systems. And every place I went, I worked in clay. Every place I went empty, and I came home full. So my work is my ceramic work, my mixed media work, my activism, my work in Cambodia with girls who were once trapped in the sex industry, and my work is teaching. My work is being a auntie, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague. My work is really, really broad, and I do it in seasons. I'm in the studio 4 or 5 months hard time, and then I'm doing activism work, and then I'm doing promoting my work in galleries, I'm doing my apron business, etc., etc. So as we look around in here, and I'm not going to move my computer because it's not happy out here in the studio today, and I think it's because it's a storm. But right behind me on the wall here, you'll see all of these miniature forms, and what I'll do is I can go and take one off the wall for you. So these are my pieces here, and these are pieces. Can you see this very well? Okay, I assume you can. Here's a piece, and these are very small pieces. You can see the size of my hand, and these are my stories about excision, or these are my stories called The Unspeakable. It's about ritual excision, and it's people that I get into contact traveling in many, many parts of the world. Very, very complicated. My interest in it is interest in little girls and women's safety wherever we are in the world, even here. Oblivious to it, but I did study and research it and return to that village to understand more. So this is the scale of them now, the hand size forms. But when I began them, they were actually very, very, when I began them, they were very, very large pieces and like double the scale of our face. And when I began these pieces, which was over 20 years ago, and I work with the series periodically, is that the first time I made these pieces, I wanted to make them for us. My audience is my Western family, not the families of girls who are excised or girls who have their foot bound or girls that are soldiers. And my audience is you. And so these pieces were vaginal forms that I want to put into the face of us so that we would know that somewhere in the world, a little girl's life is in danger because of a ritual that has very, very, very old, sometimes antiquated systems, but some of them are woven into ideas, womanhood and pride. So this is what they looked like in the very, very beginning, and now they're very small. And so as I move through the work, well, you know, what I should do is show you this. This is what I would have been doing at Peters Valley had we had not the pandemic. These Zuri slippers. And these came about, I'm a world traveler living in Japan. I make slippers. And so here's another pair of Zuri slippers, really, really wonderful slippers. They're equivalent to what I would say is our flip-flap, pretty much our flip-flap. So here where I've made them out of shredded t-shirts, stretch material, and then I put some latex on the bottom to make them slip-proof. So after that, the next body of work that I'm working on, because I'm working on 5 bodies at one time, and that is a series on girl soldiers. And I have one piece that would be right here. This would be one of them. They're variations of a theme. I'll usually work on a series 8 or 9 years, and they change in time with my experiences, my education, my research. So here's one that's girl soldiers, and this is basically a body that's frozen in a space within Earth where she perished. Girls represent 30% of the population that fight wars in countries around the world, and they're particularly vulnerable to other abuses just because they're little girls. And I'm passionate about the lives of little girls everywhere because guides and my tutors and my mommies as I travel around the world solo. So this is that piece. And then here's another one that I can't really, okay, it was filled with water because it was outside. So I'm just gonna dump the water out of it because, you know, I always tell my students that accidents are pretty wonderful. So here's a piece that's right here and it's been outside and it's very, very, very beautiful with the water in it. And so what it reminds me of is a girl who's fought a war and perished, and she's actually dying in the mud and water that she fought a war in. And so these stories and reading about the girls and having known girls who fought, that's what these stories are pretty much about. And here's another one that's not completed. That's a girl soldier. And I think what I'll do with this, with her arms really, really spread out, maybe I'll make a jump rope, because what I'm talking about is the life that she had prior to going to war, which is the life of a little girl. And then what happened in that process is where she's been deconstructed into a trained killer against your will. So that's Girl Soldiers. And another series that's really, I'm working on, I've been working on this for 8 or 9 years and they're not completed, is a series on topsy-turvy dolls. I'm not going to go into the history, but topsy-turvy, if you Google them, they have a really social, political background. And most of my work is based on social things, people, things I see around the world. So here's topsy-turvy, and this one, this doll here, her face is, oh, it just went out my mind, Hillary Clinton. And then on the other side, we have Eleanor Roosevelt. And so what you don't see is they have this rod in the back and they go into a wall form that slowly spins them around and it reveals 2 girls. And I just haven't worked out the skirt part. I just got the motor, but it's something I'm really passionate about. Historically, the doll was a black doll and a white doll because of the time period and the contextual history of the time in history. These are about women in my life. So they're my contextual history. So I've got maybe 40 of these dolls and I'm really quite excited about it and just have come up against some really technical difficulties that are not even difficulties anymore. A friend of the other said, "Son, these are challenges. These are challenges." So that's that series. And here is just to show you another one. Here's another one, and this one is Jacqueline Kennedy. And then when we get her together, this is Coretta King. So we have these 2 women, and these 2 women I bring together because there's something that links them historically to my narrative. These 2 women, both of them are women whose men were assassinated. Very, very important women that carried on the work of their husbands after their husbands perished. So that, and then I think here's another body of work, and I'm going to stop with these. And these are things I'm working on also, and they really are. I live in the house that I grew up in, and I'm hoping to retire in a month or 2. And sometimes you look around the house and you look at your old echoes and you remember things from when you grew up. And my mother went blind in my late teens, and it broke her heart. And it also broke my heart that she went blind. It changed her world inside out. And I just remember once my father saying, "Well, we'll get a teacher to teach you Braille." And so a woman came one day, took my mother into a room, and she came out maybe an hour later and she says, "I cannot teach her my because of her diabetic that caused her blindness. She had very, very thick pads on her finger, and she wasn't able to feel the very delicate Braille markings patterns, which are very beautiful." And when that woman said that to my dad, I heard him say, "Make them bigger." So this is me. I call it resurfacing, reawakening, going back and remembering my mother and her last 5 years of life, just feeling the walls for where Braille was installed in the house so that she could be an active reader and stay alive in her world. So Girl Soldiers, recalling something in my memory, topsy-turvy, excision. Those are all pieces that are very, very important to me, and they start really from traveling around the world and then coming back home and taking these ideas and sharing them with my community. So that's everything here, you guys. Oh, let me show you something else, these aprons. I work in Cambodia with girls who were once abducted into the sex industry, and I've been going for 13 years. And these girls have become my chosen daughters. And what I do is I started an apron project with them. And so what these girls do, here's one right here, is that these girls make these beautiful aprons for me. And for them, it's a sustainable business. It keeps them safe. I give them enough to make about 15 to 30 for a year. And I go every year and I take back the aprons they've made and give them more fabric, and they make these wonderful aprons that I sell on my Etsy store. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. I have 8 girls in the apron project, and these aprons save lives. 1 apron a month keeps her buying rice. 2 or 3 aprons a month makes her think about, you know, buying something beautiful for her home, and 6 or 7 aprons a month allows her to educate her daughter. These aprons change lives. Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Sana, we have a question. Somebody wanted to know how they can purchase one of these aprons.
They can go on my Etsy store, but it's even better to just Musasama at Hotmail, and I'll send them a bunch of images. It's so much easier. I'm just so unraveled with Kovac. I just don't do it all now. So just Musasama at Hotmail, and I'll send them a bunch of images, and we'll go from there. They're really, really beautiful, one of a kind. They're just wonderful. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And these wonderful girls are survivors. They call me mum, and I call them my chosen daughters, and they introduce themselves as survivors. So bravo to them, bravo. Thank you, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your powerful inspirations and stories.
You're welcome.
Fantastic presentation. And her website is up in the chat. We can repost it again at the bottom here if people want to see more images and get those links.
Okay, so
We're next going to be joined by David Licata. David is an artist from New York who has been teaching and working with glass for over 16 years. He's a graduate of Cranbrook Academy of Art with an MFA in metalsmithing and BFA in sculpture. From wearable chainmail to interactive nature-based sculptures, his intricate torch-worked glass works of art have been exhibited at SOFA, Glass Weekend, Talente, and Laura Donifer's glass fashion shows. David has taught high school art and glass workshops at various craft schools such as Penland, Peters Valley, Brookfield Craft Center, and Silver Mine Craft Center. So welcome, David.
Hi, glad to be there. Let me see if I can share the screen. All right, see everything?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you, Brienne, for that great introduction. And yeah, I wish I was here at Thunder Mountain in the special topics area where I would be teaching. I think I had 2 classes to be teaching this summer. And this is me, I think circa 2010, teaching a glass class there. So mostly I'm working with glass. As you can see, I have a oxygen propane torch, and this is using borosilicate glass. I shape glass and make various objects from, I started making glass trees when I was at SUNY New Paltz, and I made a whole installation for my degree show with that kind of stuff. I made glass orchids. I mean, these are lady slippers, and I did a whole installation project at Cranberry Lake Preserve in White Plains. And then I've made lots of animals, and I teach a lot of sculptural ways of working with glass. All the times I've been in Peters Valley, I've never seen a bear. I mean, this is a grizzly bear model, but I would hope I wouldn't see that there. And then I was going to teach a class on wearable art this summer. And this is some of the examples that I do have some jewelry that I make at Peters Valley Crafts at the store, and some earrings. But I was really going to talk about what I'm focused on right now is my chainmail. And so I've been working in chainmail since about, I started in high school making chainmail, but it was around 2005 that I really started to realize that I could make it out of glass. And here is actually, I found a picture of Kristen Muller, the director of Peters Valley, wearing one of my pieces way back when she was the education person at Brookfield Craft Center. So she wore this to SOFA, New York. And this was my first choker necklace and earrings. And so she wore this to one of the night events there. The following year, I had this piece, this shawl, worn by me actually at SOFA, New York, with Snyderman Works Gallery out of Philly. This is my friend Lara modeling the piece. And yeah, so this was a glass shawl. It's all inspired by traditional chainmail armor. Like this is a Japanese 8-to-1 stitch. So that means I'm using 1 large link and 8 little links. Creates a really interesting pattern. And this piece can be worn like, I don't know, 10 to 15 different ways. Same piece on a different model. This is my friend Chris wearing it in water. He is wearing clothes. It's just cut off in the water. And it's just a very different look between the two. This is also a very detailed image of the piece. So yeah, I just got fascinated with chainmail and kind of stuck. I made a lot of necklaces, like this piece was shown at SOFA Chicago, again with Snyderman Works. And yeah, it's actually not that heavy. I wore it around, took it off my head, put it on other people's. You know, this is a image that I had a friend, you know, do more of like a model kind of shot. I mean, I was very fascinated with the ways this work could look very different from being still, being on a form, and then within nature, which I'll show you a little bit later. I went to Cranbrook for grad school, and at Cranbrook after that, I made some installation work. And like instead of making really thick chainmail, I made really, really thin, and realized the tensile strength of the chainmail and how it could really withstand quite a lot. So this is in the stairwell going down to the metal studio. And I made about, I think it's about 20 feet tall, 15 to 20 feet long. There's no monofilament, it's all glass holding it together. Inspired by rock climbing gear, inspired by, I mean, I had little C connections or little, almost like carabiners, hooking everything together, all out of glass. Yeah, I really love the shadows through this piece. I did a similar installation at Westchester Community College a few years later. I mean, this brought me to my later wall work, which just really, I'm fascinated with the shadows that the work creates. And then Laura Donifer's glass fashion show. So Laura Donifer is an artist from Canada, and she, for the Glass Art Society conferences, she has these really amazing fashion shows every few years. So this was my first one in 2016. That's me clean shaven with a model from, as a student from Texas, modeling my dress. And this is me wearing a piece in the costume contest, or not contest, but everybody had to participate, which was just an amazing way to meet artists from all over the world and, you know, see how everybody makes wearable pieces of art. This is the back of Natalie's piece. Like originally I made this dress to meet like a model that was a little bit bigger. So this was an adjustable piece because she was super skinny. And I have a train that was actually, could be attached to it on the back. I then did a show at the Toledo Art Museum. This is the artist Joanna Manusis, and she is modeling my piece again. Not the same one, just I actually made a double because that piece ended up selling. And then I wore this one in red, similar style to the first one that I made. And then fast forward to 2018, I went to Venice, Italy, and we had the glass fashion show there. This was me and my wife modeling these two pieces inspired by Carnival. And so we dressed in these costumes. They had only about 20 artists this time, and we were in gondolas going down the main canal in Murano, ending the weekend on a Friday night, which was awesome. Oh, excuse me, on a Sunday night. And then this is some images on the gondolas and a picture of the same shawl, but on a mannequin. This is my piece. I did it all in twisted cane. So I hand-did all this twisted cane, all inspired by Venetian glassware. And then, yeah, it was pretty fun to do this on a canal. Now wall work. So I've been making all those pieces, you know, they don't always sell for people who want to be wearing them every day. So these make great wall pieces. Kenise Barnes Gallery in Larchmont. This is her showing a piece in a stairway. So this a commissioned piece for a fade of a color. I created more organic pieces for some vacation homes in Rhode Island. This piece was on the wall of my apartment here in New York City, and cast really great shadows in the morning. And I would just sit there drinking my coffee, watching the sunrise and like having the light go across it throughout the day. I have this currently on show at Kenise Barnes. I've been doing a lot of photography in nature with my work because, like I said, it looks so different in different areas. So I've been taking the same shawls, carrying them out in my backpack, and photographing them, doing some long exposures in the woods, putting them into the water. This piece I actually got up at 4 a.m. in Scotland and climbed up, and in Edinburgh I went and watched the sunrise, and just really loved this piece, how it just conforms to the rock right before the sun came up. Great conversation starters for those people that are up that early. This piece is up on top of Breakneck Ridge. I mean, the great thing is none of this work ever harms anything. I take it with me, not breaking any glass. The glass is pretty strong, actually. This is a piece I just really loved how it formed into the landscape. One of my favorite swimming holes up near New Paltz, currently closed because of COVID. And this piece, again, crazy walking in the woods in the rain. And then time of COVID, I have some work up right now, or I had some wall pieces up. I had a solo show, and then I had some work actually with Peters Valley during their exhibit. And then I have some work right now at Habitat Gallery in Michigan that I just installed the similar Venice dress and this headpiece. All right, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, David. David has 2 of those beautiful wall installations available in the Making Matters exhibition, which is on view through the end of October on the Peters Valley Gallery website. So I encourage you to see his pieces and all the other work by some of our would have been 2020 summer instructors in that show. And that is going to be our last presentation for tonight. For those of you who were looking forward to Keith Tompkins' presentation, we are going to reschedule that because he ran into a technical difficulty tonight. So you'll just have to come back and see more artist presentations. So thank you again for joining us. If you came in late and didn't put where you're from in the chat, we'd love to see where everybody's joining us from. So we encourage you to type right there in the chat where you're from. And thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night.